manager. Back there, we have Ayana Brown and Ben Johnson. They're our events coordinators. Sierra Demers runs internships, if any of you are ever interested in internships, and she's our administrator. Hannah Shea is our director and oversees operations, generally our student director. And am I forgetting anyone? No. Oh, yes, Garrett, our newest team member, Garrett Craig, has the coolest title ever, Special Operations, which who knows what that is? Garrett, probably. So let's get started, and I'll go ahead and introduce our three guests for today. To my left is Hunter Mans. He's with Eden Tech, and we have John Cole with UV360, and that's the parent company of what a lot of people might know is Sterabin, and Rod Shute with MedLight ID. So will you please give them a round of applause for me? So instead of, sometimes, people want their biographies written out and read by someone else. I thought today what we could do is just go down the line, have you each introduce yourself, tell us about your company, and tell us a little bit about what it does. And then once we're done with that, we'll kind of start to talk about government, public policy, challenges, things like that. There's a little button down there that if you hold it, it'll turn on the light. So, Hunter, let's start with you.
So I was a student here at DSU. I was in the mechanical engineering program, and I came here with Dr. Provost. He brought me over here, and I came up with an idea for a system to improve the desalination process, which is the process of turning ocean water into fresh water. And I started working on it here at the school and was lucky enough to work with some of the professors here to get it off the ground. And once that happened, I was able to talk to some local investors and angels, and they were able to help us turn that dream of helping change the world and produce more water for people into a reality. So ever since, we've been working on our piece of technology, and we've been working with various governments and customers to continue to develop the technology and get it out into the world. The technology itself is a centrifuge, if there's any engineers out there, but it's a more efficient way to take the waste stream or byproduct of desalination plants and turn it into fresh water. So for certain plants, especially in California and in the United States, it can be as effective enough to double your plant profitability, which helps more plants be built in the United States. So that's kind of what we're working on, and we've been really lucky to be able to be a part of the Atwood Innovation Plaza family and the DSU family here.
Great, thanks. And John?
Yeah, so I'm a Dixie State graduate. Graduated here back when it was Dixie State College, and have been running businesses here in Southern Utah for quite some time, and been involved in the Atwood Innovation Plaza even before that was formed, as kind of a mentor and volunteer. And there were two men that had this idea to disinfect airport security bins using ultraviolet light. I thought that was pretty cool as a business traveler. Those bins they're found to be more than 18 times more contaminated than the toilets in airports. So kind of gross. And the next time you travel, make sure you wash your hands after that. So I saw that as a really cool concept. We offered to invest and started running the company as we formed it, and have built it up for the last couple of years, working out of the Atwood Innovation Plaza. And just as of last month, I guess a few weeks ago, we merged with a Seattle-based company, and we now operate as a company called UV360. We've got two wholly owned subsidiaries, and all of our products are in the UV disinfection space. So we're continuing to pursue airports, but we're also in hospitals, food processing facilities, and also working on medical equipment and other types of opportunities.
And Rod, last but not least. And Rod brought some visual aids as well, which I think is great. And hopefully he'll show them to us. Yeah.
So Rodney Shutt, I've been in the community for about 3.5 years. We started with a product called MedLight ID. Its purpose is patient safety. So as you'll see, we have 3 products now under our umbrella. We actually acquired 2 additional products that were invented by DSU students that we added under our portfolio. They're all around patient safety. So MedLight ID is specifically focused on the acute care clinical areas in hospitals. Decades-old problem called infusion confusion. Dr. Wayne Provost, with his son Dusty, identified this problem and about a decade ago started a solution. Evolution of technology allowed us to miniaturize it, solve it through some wireless technology. So I'm hopefully you've never had a loved one or a friend that's been in the ICU for any length of period of time, but the average ICU patient in the United States has 8 of these infusion lines, IV lines that go into them, and sometimes as many as 18 or 20. Only one of all those lines is considered the safe line. It's the saline bag line. So when a nurse comes in to push a drug, there's only one line of all those lines that they can push that drug in safely and not have to be concerned about an adverse drug event. Again, a few months ago, as we looked at expanding our portfolio, we added an oxygen delivery switch, which is a patient safety, to convert one oxygen output into 2. And again, a respiratory therapist student, with the help of Dr. Provost, came up with this disposable device, very low cost. And then another student came up with an oral solution for the dental market. So about 20% of all dental patients have a gag reflux issue, which obviously jeopardizes the procedures that the dentist can do. So again, it's a disposable product that actually blocks the gag reflux and allows the dental offices to perform more procedures. So all around patient safety, all around clinician productivity, and from an economic standpoint, either saves money or generates more revenue for those 3 clinical areas.
Fantastic. And my background is law, and I worked in politics prior to that. But I also owned a business. And so, but a lot of people haven't. And so kind of take us through, if you don't mind, those first steps after the business is conceived of. I mean, a lot of people don't even know about getting incorporated, and then some of the legal barriers that exist. And then we're going to talk a little bit after that about some of the regulatory and government barriers, and then we'll talk about some opportunities too. But kind of take us back. I know it's a bit rudimentary, but I think it's important. Hunter, let's start with you. This is your first business, right?
Yep, this is my first business.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so some of the kind of, I guess, beginning legal of the business was deciding the entity type. So in the beginning, we went with the LLC, and there's a lot of tremendous resources at the plaza and people there that can help you make the decision on what entity type to choose. We went with an LLC, and we filed all the correct paperwork to do that. And then recently we converted over to a C corporation, which is what you see most companies in the United States. They're C corporations, and it's easier to work with investors, give out stock, go public. All those kind of things are through that. So it was definitely, I can say, as for my first business, it was definitely a little bit confusing when I first started, and I was kind of frustrated by the process. I thought it'd go quicker, but you can do a lot through just researching online and figuring out what works best for your company and what works best long term. So
is that a lot what you did? You used online tools to help you kind of
there's
navigate that process?
there's a ton of online tools that you can use. I know it sounds dumb, but there's like LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer. There's a lot of online templates and a lot of things you can utilize that will actually save you a lot of money down the road when it comes to legal costs. So if you're looking to start your business, you can pretty much file a lot of stuff online for a few $100s to get started.
I mean, LegalZoom's the reason why I'm in education now and not practicing law anymore. No. John, what about you? Take us kind of back to the beginning and sort of those early stages, and what was something that that was a barrier at first and difficult to overcome initially?
I think, like Hunter mentioned, there's a lot of confusion. It can be overwhelming when you start a business. There's all sorts of laws and things you have to comply with, but also getting organized, getting the right paperwork in place. And that's on a local level, state, federal, you name it, there's different things. But I think the biggest thing is getting comfortable asking questions. As Hunter mentioned, there's places to find the resources. If you're locally, even at the university, you've got the Appalachian Plaza and other resources. But a lot of times you may have to go to the city and say, what do I need to do? Or you go to the state, I'm trying to get this, what do I need for a sales tax license? And it's talking through those questions. There's usually somebody that can point you in the right direction, but you got to get comfortable asking questions.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Yeah, Ron.
I think they both nailed it. there's a piece though that I think comes before that, and that's where the resources at the plaza are very helpful, and that's understanding whether you have a marketable idea, right? So there's a lot of analysis to understand what's the size of market, what are the channels you could potentially sell into, how attractive is your product, right? And understanding that strategy and business plan to see if it's a worthy product or service to pursue by having a very large total addressable market. And working through that market research is overwhelming. And the resources over at the plaza have been very, very helpful, being able to present that economic model that says, okay, if we only get a small little piece of this huge market, we have a very nice business. And being able to formalize all that, which then leads you into your, whether it's an LLC or a C corp, because as you're going out to raise capital, you have to have that business plan that suggests to potential investors that if we're even modestly successful, this is an attractive investment for me.
And making sure that you're complying with blue sky laws and all the securities laws, and it can be overwhelming. Do any of you consult attorneys on a regular basis? I know you said LegalZoom, but now that the entity is informed, do you have counsel or outside counsel, I assume, at this point, or do you have insight? Do you have general counsel?
We do. We were fortunate to have a resource that joined our team, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship, which saves us a lot of money going to outside counsel. Now, obviously, our patent attorneys are external, but having that internal business law resource has been invaluable.
I've seen some of my law and politics students here. Some of them want to be lawyers. That's the job. Okay, that's the one as a lawyer that everyone wants. General counsel, in-house counsel. Okay, so we're the Institute of Politics. This is fantastic hearing about Atwood. I didn't realize they provided so many resources, and this is why I wanted to have this kind of event. That's wonderful that they really help you get off the ground. Once you're off the ground, okay, you've got your entity, you've got your investors, you've set yourself up on a legal basis. Now, you're going out to market, you're trying to advance the product. And I know there's so many things that you do within your own business and that sort of thing. But since we're having a pizza and politics event, can you start telling me about some of the impediments that you started noticing? The regulatory impediments, the public policy, the government. Let's start with you, Hunter, again. And what happened? What did you first see as an impediment in terms of? I mean, all three of your products, I know, everything from healthcare. There's going to be a lot of regulations that you have to navigate. What were the big ones, and how did you overcome it?
So obviously regulations exist for a reason, which obviously is great to have, but a lot of the times they do turn into roadblocks, especially right now. We're doing a lot of work with the Navajo Nation, and there's a lot of checks and balances and a lot of approval to do anything out there. So we'll have a timeline that we believe is correct, and then we'll find out we need one more person to check the box on something in their Department of Justice, which is something that we've dealt with a lot. And the best ways to overcome that and to know if you're going to be able to move quickly through that process is if what you're providing solves a big enough pain point, and then if you have the adequate connections in that space. So we were lucky enough that most people going out there wouldn't have been able to move through a lot of the regulatory processes, but we were able to get in contact with the right people to help let us know the shortcuts to go through things. So that's a big thing in regards to regulations and how government bodies can kind of come in and block you. It's knowing in advance and preparing for that when you can, and then also when you're faced with something, making sure you meet the right people to help you overcome that and figure out there's many ways to expedite it. So governments usually have a way to expedite things if you pay the right fee. So
that's a fee thing. How did you make those contacts?
For Navajo Nation, it was funny. We actually made a contact over through Instagram, which was pretty hilarious. We were trying, in regards to Navajo, certain groups and places care more about certain things. So it always works with anything, but finding respected people in the community, and then they usually have good political contacts they can introduce you to. And then at that point, it's all about if your solution is really viable. So last week we were over at Window Rock, which is their capital, and we met with the president and vice president staff, and we met with some of the local Navajo congressmen, they call them delegates, and to help push through some of the roadblocks we were having. So.
And that's one thing too. Of course, we talk about in political science. The United States has so many different jurisdictions. I'm going to talk about the idea of portability in a second here. But before I do that, John, tell me about some of the regulatory, the bigger ones that, or government roadblocks that you experienced building your business.
So for us, we actually are classified as a pesticide device by the EPA. As strange as that sounds, we are killing microscopic bugs. They consider a pesticide device the reason you can like to kill something. We've also worked with the TSA, the IRS, USDA, looked at the FDA and a lot of things. And kind of back to the earlier comment, I had to ask questions. A lot of it you won't know right up front. A lot of it comes down to asking a question. You may get cross one of the bridges with EPA and they say, okay, you also need to talk to this organization. Sometimes it's another interdepartment group, and so a lot of the times you have people that'll help along that path. I know the regulation can be a roadblock. You don't want to get caught in a situation where you're going against regulation, getting hot water. But I found in a lot of cases, if the governing bodies see that you are making an effort to do the right thing and trying to cross that bridge, even when you make mistakes, they will walk you through that. And our experience has been quite helpful, I think, for some of the federal levels, despite being slow in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear, actually. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, specific to healthcare, there's a lot of governmental bodies that you have to work through. They feel like barriers in the beginning, but they really turn into catalysts once you either provide the necessary information or cross the hurdles that they ask you to go over. So regardless of your sector, I mean, healthcare, we all kind of start out early with the USPTO, right? The patent office, working through your IP attorneys. In healthcare, the next challenge you face is the FDA, right? So any medical product generally has to go to the FDA, and they determine where you're going to fall. Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. Class 1 is a couple months of work. Class 3 is like an implantable device. You're talking years and millions of dollars. So once you clear the FDA process, the next group that you're likely going to deal with is if you're going to sell into what we would call our national healthcare system. Most people don't think we have national healthcare in the United States, but we do. It's called our federal healthcare program that the VA, the Veterans Administration, and the Department of Defense. So if you're going to sell into those people, you're going to be working with those groups. And then, one of the very beneficial agencies that most people don't know about is called U.S. Commercial Services. So if your product has at least 51% made in the USA, whether that's know-how, whether that's electronics, software, etc., the government provides a department called U.S. Commercial Services, and that is external. So they want to help us export. So you can engage them and tell them what countries in the world you want to sell to, and they'll go vet stocking distributors in any of those countries and key them up for you to go do live one-on-one interviews. So they're a huge help in moving your products out of the U.S. for global expansion.
And you and I were having a conversation about that agency just the other day. He was in Scotland. He just got back from Scotland. Prior to that, he was in Dubai, and so he might be a little jet lagged at this point. But I think a lot of people don't know about that. They don't know that that resource is there. I don't know. When you and I first met a couple of years ago, and we haven't seen each other since, but when we first met a couple of years ago in Wayne Provost's office, you were telling me about, sorry, I'm kind of going to jump ahead and jump off of that. You were telling me about going to Saudi Arabia with a delegation from the state legislature, I believe, at the time. let's piggyback off of what Rod said. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about the state government, or even if that's a federal agency. But tell us a little bit about how government has sort of helped you with expanding your business, your market, that sort of thing.
Yeah, with that trip, that was done to there's a great program through Utah World Trade. Um, because of COVID, we had to do a lot of our stuff over Zoom, so we weren't able to actually go. But we got to meet with a lot of interesting people there. We're hoping to schedule another trip out there in person soon. But um, yeah, that was extremely helpful going out there for that part of our business. But I was trying to remember, what was the other part of the question?
Well, I was just wondering, what other resources have you relied upon that have helped you kind of expand markets, or navigate your way through either the world market or even the national?
Yeah, that organization, like Rodney was saying, there's a lot of sponsored groups through the state and through the federal level that will really help you navigate um, and get you to the right people. I think that's the biggest thing is Utah World Trade was able to, and the state was able to pair me up with some of the decision makers in the Middle East versus me trying to go and say, hey, hi, I'm a student. Can you speak with me? It was coming from the governor's office. That's the introduction. So the state and people at the federal level can really be helpful in opening up the door. A lot of the times it's up to you to keep that door open. So, but that's been insanely helpful in regards to connections. So the governor's office and um, Utah World Trade's been extremely helpful in those connections.
Has that been your experience too, John?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. We also qualified for a similar event. And I think we contacted commercial services first. They referred us to the World Trade Center. And as we started talking, we ended up being able to qualify for a grant from the Small Business Administration to go to Dubai, which we were just there 2 months ago to represent our products. And it's interesting, all those resources were there. For us, that was phenomenal. I mean, we would have never been able to go, and we wouldn't spend the money to do that. But we qualified for a grant and paid for it. And I remember asking the World Trade Center why. I mean, we were really fortunate to go. And I said, I'm so glad we went. How many people got turned down? And I was surprised that he said we could have taken more, but this is not enough people know about this. So I've been telling a lot of people about that, Atwood Innovation Laws, all these resources that are already there. People anxious to help you grow your business, and it's a great resource.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know about the degree to which there's public and private partnerships, with private business relying upon government. Um, I said I was going to mention portability. I was going to mention the idea of scaling up. One of the things I know from licensure requirements, right? No one has reciprocity with California. So if I want to go and be a lawyer somewhere else, I have to take the bar in each one of those states and meet the requirements. Utah, for example, doesn't like outside lawyers. What's been your experience with that? So let's say you get to know the Utah market, you get to know certain regulatory barriers, you get to know, in the case of positive sense, the World Trade Center. What happens when you try to expand the business nationwide? I understand internationally, maybe you have consumer services, but how do you do that? How do you go about the process of navigating each one of these different markets? Healthcare, particularly, has a lot of that, doesn't it, Ron?
You really have, a couple of choices to make when you start to commercialize your products, specifically in the U.S. Nirvana would be to hire a whole bunch of your own salespeople, train them, because you have 100% of their mind share. As a startup, and even small businesses, cash is king, right? So to take on this burden of 20, 30 additional employees that only sell your product, most small businesses can't afford that. So your other option then is to look at distributors, right? So there's all kinds of different distributors out there, regional specialty distributors. So you really have to understand what you're looking for. So for example, MedLight ID and OxySwitch, the call point is the ICU or critical care. So then you go looking for these regional specialty distributors that carry other products where their main call point is going to be to your target audience. So it's a much lower cost to the company because they earn commission. You don't pay unless they sell. The downside of that is they carry other products, right? So your product may be one of four in their bag. So you're lucky if you're getting 20-25% share of mind. So it's a trade-off, right? And um, typically startups have to go that route until they get cash flow positive, and then start to move away or move to their own direct sales force.
John and Hunter, is that kind of your experience as well? I mean, is that what you've had to? Is that how you envision it, or I guess the products make a difference there, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I haven't had as much experience, but also the calculation in cost, and there's a lot that goes into expanding out locally. So and being able to keep up with demand in manufacturing, and it's a whole headache once you start trying to expand.
So is it picking your markets then, strategically picking the markets, and then
Yeah,
just okay?
yeah, that'd be the best, is picking the most strategic market where you have the most leverage in regards to negotiation. So all of us are in hardware, so when it's a software issue, it's not as hard to expand, and it's pretty easy. But when it comes to what we do, there's a lot of work that goes into it.
John, what's been the challenges in terms of expanding that you've seen, particularly when it comes to these different jurisdictions in the United States?
Well, we started, Rod kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, one of his comments, is that when we started, we were only focused on the airport security. So all the airport security in the United States goes through the TSA. So everything had to go through DC. So we've been working on that. And we realized that we've got this expertise, and that was a roadblock. How do we get it to airports? Airports are wanting it, but we're held up by this one point. And so as we looked at other products, we said, hey, we can take the same expertise, use it in a different field, but it was a different type of regulation. So we can bypass some of the more complicated for that application, go to a different one. And I know with a lot of, Rod was talking about choosing your market segment, things like that. There were other products in the UV space that were able to look at places where there was a lot less regulation, and that was their focus. And we've gone after big fish, and we're making good progress there. And so it plays an impact on what type of struggles you face as you try to expand, knowing what regulations and roadblocks you face.
Two things. One, when I owned a business, I know that my competitors were much, much larger. This was a small business. We're actively lobbying for more regulation. And it was our suspicion that, one of the reasons for it was we were smaller, didn't have the legal team, didn't have the accountants, didn't have whomever that we needed to sort of navigate that. Is that something you generally agree with? It's surprising to a lot of people that perhaps big business is very often behind the push for more regulation. Is that your experience? Are you shaking? Yeah, Rod?
There's a necessary amount of regulation that every industry requires to ensure quality, right? But then there's this tipping point where regulation gets stacked on and stacked on and stacked on, which really becomes a detriment to especially a smaller business, because they don't have the resources to comply, do the research. It adds more cost. The more regulation beyond quality, safety, etc., and I'm peanut butter spreading this a bit, usually you have, I'll say, special interest groups that are driving for some strategic reason to add on regulatory requirements. And that's usually focused to help a select few, not necessarily all entrepreneurs that want to get in and maybe have a better widget or a better idea or a better solution, but they fundamentally can't play because of the cost it takes to comply with all the stacking on of regulation.
Yeah, and I think there's a wide consensus, and this also sometimes surprises people, including my students, that a lot of businesses at all levels are okay with the regulations. And when we were in the food business, we wanted our food to be safe. But yeah, have you experienced that at all, Hunter? Has that come in with you yet? I mean, you're dealing probably with some really large competitors.
Yeah, the biggest thing I saw early on was there was a lot of grants out for what we were doing in regards to research and developing our product, specifically in our space, because water is such a big issue. And we thought, this is great. We're going to apply for all these grants. We're going to get all this money. We're going to be able to get a really great start. We fit all the criteria. I don't know why we wouldn't get it. So we applied to all of them, didn't get a single one. Found out that how a lot of these grants work a lot of the times. I know I'm speaking mainly about grants, but a lot of different things are created by the government and regulations. Is like Rodney was saying, that I'll take it a step, probably a lot of them are lobbied for. So, and that happens all the time. And even with, it's not necessarily wrong, with in regards to our experience in Navajo Nation, a lot of the stuff we're doing out there, they don't have in place. So we've had to work with and technically lobby their government to create things. So to get paid to do studies and do all those things. So, but yeah, you'll find a lot of stuff, like Rodney was saying, is created to create a barrier, or to, that's the biggest thing, is to create a barrier, or to help continue to fund or add to the security of the existing business.
That was actually going to be my next question, but and you can address this as well. I know that you've been to DC, and I know that you mentioned lobbying. You've been involved in lobbying at all, John?
There aren't a lot of lobbying groups like Rod and others mentioned, but we have worked a lot with the state congressmen and senators' offices, trying to get support that way. I was just going to mention, back on the previous point, with some of that lobbying, a lot of the government programs that are set up for, whether it's grants or other things, a lot of it is designed around big business. And every economy needs big business and small business, but a lot of it requires a lot more resources to be able to manage those situations than you can from a small business. There are programs in place where certain government proposals are only permitted by small business, which helps. But some of the challenges we face is that if we go to, try to get, I wouldn't necessarily say lobbying, but support of a government agency on what we're doing. I've had some that have said, well, if you can find a big business to help with this, it wasn't in terms of capital or anything else. It was that we have a relationship with them, we've got the resources, we can push things through faster. And so there's a lot with that, and trying to navigate that is always a challenge as well.
Have you interacted with the Small Business Administration, SBA, and have they been helpful? Yeah. Well, we're getting close to allowing the audience to ask questions. We like to have an interaction with our audience. We talked a little bit about kind of, I think, given a rather positive view, sort of the interaction potentially with government, and how some of the regulations are okay and some policies okay. What's an example of that, other than, let's say, interacting with the agencies themselves? And is the IRS included in that? You mentioned the IRS. Yeah, they're included in that as well. Is there? Can you give us an example of a regulation that has a positive effect? Something that we haven't talked about perhaps before. Yeah, John.
I can mention one.
Sure.
Obviously we've been experiencing COVID for the last 2 years. Our focus started long before COVID, but because of COVID, everyone has become familiar with ultraviolet light. We see it everywhere. There's magic wands you can wave and all these things. The EPA, because it oversees it, when we had our federal inspections, they even talked about the problem they've seen with cheap products that are completely ineffective, but have flooded the market. It's hurt the consumer and everybody else. And to me, that was a positive, because we knew what it took to actually kill something to be effective. It cost us a lot of money to make that happen. And to see somebody else come in that was basically deceiving customers, that's a big deal. So the EPA has actually cracked down to make sure that other people are complying with that.
About the snake oil. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you have something to say, Ron?
I would just say the FDA process, it can be seen as a nightmare, but if you indeed can be classified as an FDA Class 1 device, 510(k) exempt, it's a very easy process. It's the stamp of approval that says to every hospital and every healthcare individual that this is an FDA approved product, so that once you clear those hurdles, it reduces the barriers when you're trying to sell the doctors, nurses into healthcare, etc.
It was the little A that was in my restaurant window. Yeah, that's the certification. That's right. Anything going on in Congress or where state legislature is currently in session? I always like to try and leave the audience with some sort of action items, and it's amazing when I speak to legislators at all levels. It's amazing how few people actually write and get involved. And we used to keep tally when I worked on Capitol Hill and at the Capitol here, state Capitol. And people are surprised at how few people actually get involved. Is there anything that you would be pushing right now that you're in favor of, or anything that you're keeping track of? How do you keep track of it? Let's do that as a two-part, guys. How do you keep track of what's going on legislatively? And then, is there anything you've got on your radar?
So I've tried to stay in touch with the National Small Business Association. They keep track of a lot of the laws and things that are passing and how it affects businesses. I would say the one thing I would advocate for personally is simplicity and support for small businesses. We know that, I don't know the statistic, but it's 90% of jobs are created by small businesses in the country. And being able to create an opportunity where businesses have that opportunity to really push and advance and not be maybe side railed by some of these challenges with bigger companies.
You seen anything? Are you keeping track? Is there anything on the horizon for your business that you're aware of right now that you want people to be aware of?
I know Hunter mentioned with the grants, there's a program called SBIR, and Hunter may have to help remind me. It's the Small Business Innovation Research, Investment Research. And there's these grants you qualify for, and that's a really big thing. I know there's been talks of expiring that bill, which would eliminate a lot of those programs. I know it's a challenge to get. We've had similar challenges as well. But I know it does affect a lot of businesses. So I know a lot of businesses are pushing to keep that bill open because of the funding to be able to support these ideas and get them going where they otherwise are not going to have to do so.
Is that how you guys are keeping track of pending legislation and new regulations and things like that?
Fortunately for my business, being medical device, healthcare, Utah is really blessed with an association membership called Bio Utah, which is a very inexpensive membership. Kelvin Cullimore is the president CEO. So all the medical device companies in Utah tend to join this association. And then the association has lawyers, lobbyists. So anything that is pertinent from regulatory laws, proposals, gets reviewed through that group. And we typically have a call once a month, and they inform us of anything new that we think may be interesting or may impact our business. So it really centralizes the information path versus a small business having to know that there's 62 different people I got to go tap to find out if it's going to be impacting my business.
Yeah, and the Chamber of Commerce has something like that. I sit on a policy steering committee for them. Okay, great. What about you, Hunter?
Yeah, there's a lot of local resources to what John said too. SBIR is a great program, although it's challenging. A lot of really great pieces of technology have been created through that program. I think even like 23andMe, like a lot of these businesses, a lot of younger people have heard of, have been generated through that program. So that's something to really support. And in regards to trying to keep up on policy, I guess the best thing is just to obviously be in touch with the news. So in regards to what I do, I hear a lot about different bills that got passed in regards to infrastructure bills that I get through the news, and then also through being in touch with different individuals in the state, Chamber of Commerce to Utah World Trade, and then also to, if it's an exact customer that I'm working with, I usually take an extra effort to find somebody that's related to the government that can kind of give me a heads up on what's coming down or what's being worked on at that time.
Fantastic. Last question, and then I'll turn it to the audience. Is it worth it? I mean, with all of the different, difficulties and how, is it worth it? Would you do it again? I mean, I know
Absolutely.
you have done it again before, but yeah, worth it?
Yeah, I wouldn't trade it. I mean, that's part of the journey, right? It's challenging. What we have learned in the last 3 years and what we're doing, I mean, you can't replace that. I mean, it's education of just continuing to work that process, and it's going to stick with you.
Yeah, I think it's totally worth it. There's a lot of hard times, and that kind of helps you build character and strength in all aspects of your life. And then you learn a lot through that process. So every day when you're trying to create a business or run a business, you're learning on the fly with a lot of things. So really helps expand your knowledge base, and then yeah, like John was saying, the reward that comes with being able to actually solve something or figure something out that you've waited weeks to months to years to finally figure out is definitely worth it. So
And that's been my experience with entrepreneurs. They'll very rarely mention the money because even after they've made a lot of money, then they take a little time off and they start another one. And it's that passion of doing something. Do we have a microphone available? Yeah, there's Ben Johnson, one of our event coordinators. He can walk around. If you just raise your hand if you have a question for any of these guys, feel free to ask it. It's okay. We won't judge you. How long have you been in business?
We've been in business since late 2019. We started development in 2018.
Okay, so you're still pretty young. How about the other two?
around 2019 as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we're about 3.5 years.
Okay. I started a business years ago, software company, years ago when PCs just came out. And you're still really young. And I ran that for 81 to 2000, 2008 when it crashed. That was it. So any kind of event like that can impact your business. That obviously impacted ours. We're losing customers like crazy. But it's interesting, yeah, because you haven't hit longevity yet. 3 years is still if you're successful, that's excellent, because most of them fall within the first year, 50%. Second year, another 50%, and they drop like flies. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there are forces out there that you can try to mitigate against. And well, let's talk about that for a second. How do you go about that? I mean, it was February of 2020, and I'm standing in front of a political science class, and I told them, I said, it's been about 10 years since we saw, and maybe even a little bit more, which is more than half of their lives, since we had seen a real kind of economic crash and the mortgage crisis and that sort of thing. I said, but it's coming. Something's coming. I said, I don't know what it is. I didn't predict a virus. I'm not that smart. But how do you mitigate against that? And does government help with that, frankly?
I think the most important thing is having a great idea of what your product is and what you're working on. I think all three of us have something that really impacts population in general. So in regards to water, to safety, to medical, those are all things that aren't going to go away. So that's crucial. And then also having that great idea so that people can buy into and agree with, and you can sell and create a good product. And then the second is the perseverance of the entrepreneur. So if you're not willing to battle through that for a prolonged period of time, then you're definitely not going to succeed. But those are the two biggest. Then government can obviously help. But yeah, like even with COVID, government has given out a lot of money to different small businesses. So it's definitely been very useful to be able to take part in that. But yeah, the biggest thing is just having a great idea and perseverance, because in all likelihood, if your business is not doing so well and you have that great idea, then you can usually convince the right people to join you and to help you fix whatever issue in your business is currently pulling you down.
I was going to say, to this gentleman's point, I mean, part of it is being flexible as well. When we started out, our focus was just airports. It's a big market. There's billions of travelers every year. But we've worked with the TSA for 3 years, even during this pandemic we've experienced. And about a year ago, we decided that we can't rely on it. If we had relied just on the airports, we probably would have just said, hey, this isn't going to fly. We could still have another couple of years working through that regulatory process, but because we made the decision to pivot and try other products, we've noticed that there's even a bigger opportunity that way. So you have to kind of roll the punches. I mean, you hit a roadblock, and turn and go another direction and get around it. So.
Yeah, so to the February 2020, so we were about to launch MedLight ID, had some trials going in February of 2020, and the next thing you know, COVID. Well, every clinical area in the United States closed down to medical device reps. So literally it prevented us from meeting with any decision makers and positioning our product. Fortunately, we were far enough along through the federal healthcare program, the VA and the DoD, that we had some traction with them that really just it saved us, right? We were able to move forward in that channel while we've all waited to see what was going to happen with COVID. But to the point of being nimble, we acquired these two other companies for protection against the unknown of what COVID. Could COVID close down all the clinical areas again and we're preventing from selling into acute care? It could. The dental space, however, was impacted by about 2 weeks and then business was normal. So we strategically acquired a product that will allow us to sell into the dental space if we're prevented to get back into acute care sometime in the future, right? So nimble, strategic, really a thirst, what everybody said. In a startup, you have to have a thirst for knowledge and you have to be willing to do anything. And what I mean by that is one day you're the shipping clerk, the next day you're the CEO, and the day after that you're the regulatory expert, and the day after that you're the IT administrator. So, and you don't know all those things, so you have to learn along the way. And I would just say, one of the biggest accelerators for a small business, as we all try to navigate all the people we want to know, is, and that's where the Atwood Innovation Plaza has been very helpful, is getting an introduction to somebody, right? So if a trusted advisor introduces me to a relationship that they have, the speed of how quickly things move is very dramatic versus me plodding along trying to find a way to either resource a person, a regulatory body. But if somebody that is a trusted advisor to that individual introduces me as a trusted advisor, there's instant credibility, and it saves weeks, if not months, sometimes.
I'm hearing networking and who you know sort of thing. I think this is the fourth or fifth time I've heard it. Important thing. Any other questions? Anyone? Oh, got one over here.
My question is, at what point did you know that your idea was at what point did you know that your idea was worth going into business for? Like, was it consuming your life? Because like Vince said, a lot of entrepreneurs don't go in for the money, they go in for the passion or the idea. It's worth something to the world. So at what point did that hit you?
That's a great question. Tipping point. Yes. Yeah.
I think for me, when I first heard the idea of behind Sterabin, behind disinfecting the airport security bins, I was running a company where I was a business traveler. I was in airports all the time, and I immediately saw the need for it. I, in a sense, lack of better terms, fell in love with the idea because it was a powerful change. I said I like that, so I got involved in it. But despite all the hardships, I know that it's an effective result. We're seeing that progress. It takes time, but it's kind of one of those things when you start believing it, it's just you stick with it. And
To what John was saying, the passion of believing in what you're doing. And then for me, I had that passion. And then I also knew I was young and I could get excited about new topics. And I liked engineering. So what I was working on, I thought, man, this is really cool. Why everyone should want this. But at the end of the day, we still need to make sure. So we're lucky enough to get in touch with some really great individuals at GE to all the way to one of the main consultants for the entire Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in regards to their water. His name's Nikolai Butchkov. He's been super beneficial to our business and basically tried to validate if my business idea with whoever's in the field is a good idea. So they'll make up for that experience and be able to point out those holes where maybe your idea is going to fail 2 years from now because you're going to hit this regulatory roadblock that you're not seeing right now. So that's key, is talking to people in the market that know it really well and saying, hey, this is my idea. Get them to sign an NDA if you need to, whatever it is to make you feel comfortable. But it's definitely worth going out there and talking to them. Even if they destroy your dreams, it's worth it because, like they were saying, you can pivot and restart it. So,
NDA, non-disclosure agreement for those out there. What about you, Rodney? Was there a moment that that sort of hit you and you said, yeah, this is going to go?
You know, the for me, I mean, pretty much my whole 36-year career has been in healthcare, and I've just always said, if you're going to work this hard, how do you leave the world a little better place than you found it? And you know, knowing that all of our products either save lives or make the job of a clinician or a physician easier, it just makes all the hard work worth it. Just knowing that when you get to market, you know, you're helping. So helps you sleep a little better at night.
That's great. Let's end on that. Give these guys a round of applause. Thank you for coming here. And thank you so much for Atwood for partnering up with us and making this happen. We'll have another Pizza and Politics in 2 weeks and Underground Railroad, right? Yeah. Okay. We'll see you then. Thanks a lot.